Good morning, I'm Annalisa Imperi.
Good morning, I'm Rachel Van Dundee.
Morning, I'm Weijian.
Good morning, I am Angeline Bautier.
Good morning, I'm Jihuan.
Rachel. So, good morning, everyone. Our group today will discuss about the approach we took to prepare for this interpreting assignment. So the title of the conference will be Improving London Transport for All Tourists. It's going to be held on the 27th of September 2018, which is an important date because it's known to be the World Tourism Day. The location will be the Frobisher Auditorium number 1 within the Barbican Centre in London. So let's move on to the second slide. Here we have the whole brief. This is very important document for us because we are able to extract some very important details about the conference itself. For example, we know from the brief that the organizer will be the TfL, so Transport for London, and also that the conference will be chaired by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. A very important example and important detail is the last line. So I would like to pay attention to this line because it talks about the broadcasting. It's important for us because broadcasting conference will have some implication on our performance as well as interpreters. So I would like now to give you a brief analysis. So we are going to extract some key information. So let's start with the mode of interpretation. We will have a simultaneous interpretation. We will be covering 5 different languages: English, French, Chinese, Italian, and Spanish. Also, the interpretation will be bidirectional because the language regime during the conference will change. So some speeches are going to be given in English, other in French, other in Chinese, and so on and so forth. Second key element is the broadcasting, as I mentioned before. So we know that we have to use shorter sentences to make sure that our quality is always very high and the standards stick to the very high quality. And also at the end of the conference, we can ask for a sample to check our quality for business purposes. The broadcasting has also some implication regarding the remuneration, because according to the IC rate, it would be given £600 per day as interpreters, and the broadcasting detail allows us to have a higher salary because we are going to be broadcast after the conference. No travel costs will be included, as all the interpreters are London-based. And the conference title, last but not least, this is a very important element for us because it allows us to start with our brainstorming and is the big starting point of our research. So I would like now to give you an overview of the title, and I would like to show you how we can anticipate the speeches. So improving London transport for all tourists. Improving shows the purpose of the conference itself. We know that very probably there will be some critics about the current status of the transport, but also maybe they're going to propose new ideas. So how can they solve this issue? London will be the location, and transport and tourists, we think that there are 2 key words because we can start the brainstorming from these 2 words. But all, we have to consider this word as well because it's saying that the range is quite broad. So we know that everyone is included in these speeches. For example, we can think about single tourists that are coming to London, or families, or disabled people, as well as groups. So, which are the next steps? We know that this is a starting point. It's very precious to us because we can start our brainstorming from this. We can work on our words and terminology to build up our glossaries. And also, is it a good starting point, but it's not enough. So we will have to request an agenda which is going to be provided by the agency. And now I will give the floor to my colleague Rachel. She's going to analyze this for you. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So we received the agenda from the agency. However, no other additional documentation was given, such as PowerPoints or scripts. So we really needed to deduce as much information as possible from the agenda itself. To begin with, the timing slots are very important as we can deduce, as we can divide the workload, between our booth partners. In addition, it's important to note that there will be a lunch break, as the interpreters may be required to provide consecutive interpretation to allow the delegates to communicate amongst themselves. Additionally, we have been given the titles of the speeches so that we can automatically start to brainstorm the topics we feel which will come up, based on our general knowledge and even past experiences. Also, in addition, it's very important to see that 2 of the speeches have not been finalised. Therefore, we need to anticipate this by researching the speakers themselves in greater depth. In light of the fact that we have been given the different speakers and the organisations which they represent, we can start researching these straight away. And lastly, the language regime of the floor has been given to us, but Annalisa has already explained this, so I will move on to the next slide. So from the agenda, we now know the speakers' names, we know the organisations they represent, and also the speech titles. I'm going to give a brief overview of the speakers themselves, and also make reference to some of the resources we used. To start with, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and also Mike Brown will be representing the Transport for London. We found the Transport for London website extremely useful for extracting terminology for this topic. Furthermore, Gianfranco Conti, the CEO of the Cesare Serrano Foundation, is a foundation which specialises in offering accessibility to disabled people. And they have their own YouTube channel, which was also extremely useful. However, it was all in Italian, so we did depend on our Italian interpreter to relay the key concepts to us. Moving on to Peter Hendy, the CEO of the Network Rail Infrastructure Limited. I will be mentioning him in greater detail on the next slide. So moving swiftly on to Gerald Lawless, the chairman of the World Travel and Tourism Council. When researching Gerald Lawless, it was interesting because we discovered he has an Irish accent, which may pose a problem to certain interpreters. So to prepare ourselves, we familiarised ourselves with his accent by listening to audiovisual material prior to the conference itself. Furthermore, when researching Do Young Shim, the ambassador and SDG of the United Nations World Tourism Organization, we found that her UN profile was very useful, engaging her field of expertise, namely sustainable tourism. Up until this point, I have only referred to high-profile speakers. However, Alex Vizio, a French travel blogger, will be using a different register, which is much lower, in fact, as it relates to his viewers, using the YouTube channel and also his blog, so we can see that this was completely different. And equally, we need to represent this as interpreters when we give our interpreted message. And lastly, Hong Kao-wei, the Deputy Director of the China National Tourism Administration, we found that all the resources available on Hong Kao-wei were in Chinese. So again, we depended on our Chinese interpreters to relay the vocabulary, key concepts, or any terminology they thought we would struggle with as well. So having looked at the different speakers, I will now give an overview of how we approach the research process. We use the same approach to research all of the speakers. However, due to time constraints, we will only give an example of 3 of these. So first of all, we have Sadiq Khan, the chair of the conference itself, and he will be giving the welcome and the introductory speech. Therefore, we can anticipate that he will use conference phrases, so we have all prepared these in our different languages. Also, it's important to note that he will be expressing his vision for improving London transport. So a key resource we found was the Mayor's strategy for Transport for London draft, as this outlined the initiatives he would like to implement for the next 25 years. So we thought that this maybe will come up. And lastly, we used interviews on YouTube to see his accent, which is very clear, but also we noticed that he's very charismatic, so we need to bear that in mind about the décollage, so we're prepared to keep up with the pace which he will be using when he gets passionate about his subject. Secondly, we have Peter Hendy, the CEO of the Network Rail Infrastructure Limited. However, in this conference, he'll be representing the Global Public Transport Summit, which he chaired in October in Montreal, and so he's representing the UITP. Therefore, we looked at the summit's website and it was very helpful because it had the programme on it which summarised all the speeches given by the speakers themselves, which is an invaluable resource to us as interpreters. So we used the key concepts from that to anticipate the vocabulary he'll be using in the conference itself. And lastly, Alex Vizillon, as I mentioned before, the French travel blogger. It's important to note that his title has not yet been confirmed. However, we can anticipate, having looked at his YouTube channel and also his blog, that he'll be referring to initiatives which have been helpful to tourists in London and even raising some concerns and complaints. Another useful resource was TripAdvisor, as you're able to write in to ask for opinions on transport for London. And so we thought this would be helpful in anticipating the different ideas or concerns which the tourists will bring to the table. So in summary, we were able to extract the information such as the speakers' names, the organisations they represented, their speech titles. We researched all of these and we compiled all of these into a glossary. We must remember that for all the sources, we weighed their reliability and also their relevance in order to prioritise our research. I will now hand over to Weijian, who will explain the glossaries in further detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. So now it's time to talk about glossary. The best friend of interpreters. Well, it's just one of the best friends of interpreters before conference, and no one can deny the importance of glossary. During my part, I will give a general overview of the glossary part, and then I will show the glossaries of our group in language pairs. To start with, to prepare the glossaries, we use different resources. That includes the monolingual and bilingual dictionaries at the level of language. And then we check the video and text resources for better understanding of the context, so that can help us understand the speaker more correctly. As for the methods, it's simple to say, it's just do the research. And the research and the resources will be further discussed by my colleague Jihuan at a later stage. When it comes to glossary, we need to organize our glossaries, and different interpreters have their own different preferences. They can be based either on an alphabetical order or to be divided based on different speeches. Next is the acronyms. Acronym is quite an important part of the glossaries because it can save the time during the simultaneous interpreting. But this mode has been already mentioned by Annalisa, and that's the mode that we use in this conference. Last but not least, the collaboration. We have different flow languages, and we do rely on the relay of other interpreters. So collaboration is key here, and my colleague Angeline will talk about it at a later stage. Now, after giving this brief overview of the glossary, I will show the glossaries from our group. To start with, the Chinese glossary. Jihuan and I used different resources. We consulted some articles and find some videos of the past conferences of the speakers that they gave in a recent time. So we can identify some frequently used words and try to familiarize ourselves with the voice and the accent of the speakers. And finally, we collaborate. Hereby, I would like to show an example. Both Jihuan and I identified a highly frequency word in Chinese, and we have different translations of the same words. Actually, it's the same phrase. So it's quite important to standardize the glossaries, and then we collaborate and finally find the right one, and that will be provided in our glossary. So after talking about the basic research, I would like to talk about some in-depth research regarding the glossary. So when it comes to preparing a glossary, it's never enough to only know the meaning of the words. We need to understand it in order to provide an accurate and timely interpretation of the original speech. For example, as Rachel just mentioned, we need to understand the United Nations aim and the sustainable tourism. They are from the authoritative websites, namely the official website of the United Nations. If we can understand this concept, we can have a better understanding of the idea behind the speakers. Apart from that, when we do our research in the Chinese speaker Hong Cao Wei, in recent conferences, they always mention the latest government policy called One Belt, One Road. If we don't understand this policy, how can we interpret his speech? So it's quite important to understand, of course, to a certain level, not very in depth, to understand the concept behind this policy. Apart from that, when we do our research, I found that when talking about tourism, nowadays people talk about the negative cost flow. That's a concept in economy and the management. If we can spend 3 minutes to understand the meaning of that, that can actually save us 10 minutes when we do interpreting, because we know the meaning of the speaker and we can interpret the logic of the speech, not only the superficial meaning, so that makes much sense. So I would like to talk about these 3 points in terms of the in-depth glossary research. Moving on to our French glossary, and this is the glossary made by Rachel. As we can see, Rachel prefers to list her glossaries based on different speeches. And I'd like to point out that since this is a fictional task, in the real life, we will include as many words as we needed, because this time we are required to only provide 50 terms. So yeah, that's just a real scenario. And then Rachel had 4 different tabs, so it's very clear for her to find the right words at the right time. And the resources are listed below. If we try to understand some background knowledge, we can refer back to this glossary list. It's also the French glossary, but Angeline takes another approach. As we can see, she prefers to organize her glossaries based on alphabetical order. It will save her a lot of time if she tries to identify the words in her glossary. Also, in terms of the platform used by Angeline, she prefers to use the Microsoft Word, while Rachel used the Google spreadsheets. Again, different interpreters have different styles. Last but not least, the Italian glossary. As we can see, Annalisa also arranged her glossaries based on speeches, and she pays extra attention to the Italian speaker because she knows that we rely on her relay. It's quite important to provide a high-quality interpretation, and we really appreciate that. She also includes some external links for us to reference at the end of the glossary. So enough about talking about the best friends of the interpreter, that's the glossary. As we can see, different interpreters do have their different preferences, but they do share some similarities. After talking about glossary, we will talk about the collaboration, also a key factor in preparation. I'll give the floor to Angeline.
Yes, thank you. When it comes to collaboration, we have found that there are several ways to collaborate. The first type of collaboration is collaboration between interpreters who share the same language combination. The second type is between interpreters who do not share the same language combination. And finally, collaboration in general, regardless of language combinations. We did find the first type extremely useful. There are so many things we can do with colleagues who share language combinations. So the first thing we thought we could do was to have a look at each other's glossary that we prepared individually in order to maybe suggest more accurate translations that we'll be aware of. It was particularly true for Rachel and I, because even though we will not be booth partners, we do have a similar language combinations, as she is English A and I am French A, so we were able to help one another a lot. So we all decided to meet with our language-specific colleagues, and we decided after meeting to create a collaborative glossary. So we would be able, online via Google Docs, so we would be able to add terms until the day of the conference, so we would all have access to the same terms. Finally, a very important aspect of the language-specific collaboration is the standardizing of the vocabulary within the booth though. So Rachel, Annalisa and I did not know our booth partners for the assignment to come. However, Jihuan and Weijian were lucky enough to know each other, so they were able to standardize the vocabulary quite early. For the second type, we were actually really surprised to find out all the things we could do with our colleagues who do not share the same language combinations as us. One extremely important aspect of that type of collaboration was in the situation where a speech will be given during the assignment in a foreign language that I do not understand. It is very helpful to contact my colleagues from that language so that they could give me some keywords or maybe some general ideas on what the speech is going to be about. So we were really lucky. We decided to meet all together and to exchange some ideas about the speeches in Chinese for ideas about the speeches in French and Italian. While meeting, we also thought it was extremely useful to help each other with the pronunciation of names in native way. For example, names of speakers who are going to give speeches, delegates, important public figures, or even just names of towns. We found it was really useful to write them phonetically, so we would be able to use them correctly during the assignment. Finally, for the collaboration overall between all of the interpreters, as you can see from this picture, we decided to do that between the interpreters from this group. And the first thing we decided to do was to discuss our background information about the subject, to brainstorm all together in order to come up with a lot of vocabulary, a lot of ideas for the topics of the speeches. It was particularly interesting to be able to give one another information about the status of, in this case, transport in all of our countries. That was useful. Furthermore, we thought it would be very interesting to discuss potential previous experiences as well. Unfortunately, we're still quite unexperimented, so it wasn't possible for us. But ideally, later, we thought that would be very precious to talk about maybe previous conferences we had to work out with a similar topic, or if we knew one of the speakers already, maybe we warn our colleagues for a particular accent or maybe a particular area of expertise that this person likes to bring up when he speaks. So we thought that would be very useful. Finally, we thought it was extremely useful again to share our glossaries all together, even though we do not share the same language combinations, because there are always English terms that we can pick up that we didn't necessarily think of. Finally, as a group, we decided as well to create another glossary for the acronyms. It was mentioned before, acronyms are very important. We need to be able to anticipate the acronyms that might come up during the assignment. So here's just a couple of examples from English that we translated into French. Of course, we all have our translations into our native languages. And we also decided to share online again the go-to conference phrases we could all think of in our native languages, translate them into English in order for our colleagues to translate them into, as you can see, French, Chinese, and Italian. Well, I think I have talked about collaboration well in depth now, so let me hand over to my colleague Jihuan, who's going to tell you a little bit more about our approach summarized.
Thank you, Angeline. So as we move on to the very last section of our presentation, so now I'd like to summarize on how we approach for this specific interpreting assignment. So first, to start with, we contact the agency for materials and documentations regarding list of delegates and agenda, and furthermore, we require contact details of the interpreters. And then we contact the interpreters for future collaboration, as well as contacting the Spanish interpreters specifically for their glossaries, because we weren't able to meet up with them. And next, we did a research for speakers, specifically on their job titles, to understand their expertise, their field of backgrounds of expertise, and also went to their previous speeches to look at if there's any difficult accent for us to work on, or how are they registered. Right, moving on. The next research we did was on the topics. So we had to stay up to date with the news, and also we went to previous conferences to understand the logic and further, if possible, anticipate on the content and what we mentioned in the future conference. And the last one is we did a research specifically for compiling glossaries. As we all know, that Weijian has mentioned before that in-depth research on glossaries is very crucial to understand and properly deliver the meaning. So moving on, before we jump into conclusion, I'd like to mention and list out the resources we did for the preparation. On the left-hand side, we can find these are the ones we found not very useful. The first one is Wikipedia. We used it mainly for terms and organizations' names and also language equivalents regarding definitions as well. And also we get a preliminary understanding of certain concepts and organizations' ideas. And next is YouTube speeches. We used it to look for themes of speeches in both source languages and target languages. And further, we were able to do the speech shadowing for stimulating our memories and so forth. And next one, I like to mention Lingui reversal word reference altogether because they both provide brilliant bilingual explanations of our research. And specifically for Lingui, it provides a well-spread parallel corpora for us, and also for reversal, it is context-based for us to do research on specific terminology. Moving on to this number 6, which is IET, and it's short for interactive terminology for Europe. And it is also context-based for terminology research. And last one, as Williams mentioned, monolingual dictionaries. These are very important for us to understand what the meanings of the words and what in-depth research we can do with the terminologies. For Chinese, we use Xinhua. And as we can have a look on the right side of the slides, these are the resources we find not helpful, but only specific to our assignment this time. So the first one is Doc88, which is a Chinese website, and it has a huge pool of information, and the standardization information varies, and also because it is a public platform of documentation, so there's lacking admin management as well. And the second one is Eurlex. It's mostly information regarding European law, so we couldn't find relevant information about tourism or accessibility regarding tourism. And the second reason we didn't use Eurlex is because it includes mainly European languages, whereas Chinese is hard for us to do research further into this website. So moving on, as we move on to conclusion, we'd like to look back to what we did. So what went well this time? So we believe that collaboration was the key and will be the key. Through collaboration, we achieved a lot. We all got benefits from sharing resources, tools, and brainstorming different ideas. And we all believe one resource is never enough for the preparation for this interpreting assignment. And as well as we need to move on to progress in the future. So what can be improved for the next time? Well, we will proceed with the boost of resources we found much more useful this time. And secondly, we will try to collaborate with ambassadors instead, because they have more real-life experience, which we didn't do this time. And last, we will try to accumulate our own conference experience. And further, we will try to attend conferences and, if possible, shadow interpreters. So last but not least, we developed understanding of realistic and fictional scenarios. We understand that in real life, we might not have the luxury of months of time for preparation and such deep in-depth research. So we need this awareness. So ideally, we like to proceed, and this is how we like to prepare for an assignment like this, if time is permitted. So at the very end of our speech, we all develop an understanding of research process, so it further enables us to evaluate our resources and tools. And thank you so much for listening. And we'll be delighted to take any questions for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you. Okay. Let's start with the rate.
So you checked AIC, isn't it? However, the assignment is based in London, so you'll be working on the private market here. Can I ask why did you check straight away the AIC website for rates? It's just your own.
Because it provides a range. So of course we have no experience. We don't know which are the rates for assignments in general.
Okay.
So it gives a very reliable rate to work with for this time.
Are there any other resources you could have used to establish the rate?
Maybe we could have contacted some interpreting agencies to ask to get an average that they usually give. We could have done that.
We can also ask for our tutors, like especially those who have been working on the private market, so we can understand like more accurately like what is the price in the market right now.
As well as ambassadors.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's good to have a range actually, rather than just go for one source and take it for granted. Okay. You mentioned broadcasting, but you just said you wanted a sample to check the quality. Could you elaborate a bit more why you asked for that?
Okay, so the conference will be broadcasted. So as I mentioned before, we will have to stick to a very high quality standard as interpreters, because it's going to be viewed by a lot of people also. It's online. So the sample will be useful for us when we have to promote our service in the private market. So we can use the sample to for our business purposes as interpreters.
Do you think it's okay to assume that they will allow you to use it to market yourself? Or how would you go about it?
I think in terms of the samples we require from the agency, the main goal is to learn our own learn our experience and evaluate ourselves. So that can be a precious material for us to improve ourselves. Then in the future we can find that maybe we didn't do well at a certain point, then we know the room of improvement, and the next time we can provide a better service. So that's the main goal, that we ask the agency like if they can give us a sample of the conference. So of course like we ask for permission if they just like.
And if you just make a phone call and they tell you over the phone, yeah, we'll see about that.
We will try to
negotiate.
Yeah, try to negotiate.
Yeah.
According to the situation.
To agree, of course.
Yeah.
I think especially at the start of our career, it can be particularly precious. So I think we can insist a little bit and tell us that it's really important to us, and if at some point we really don't have any answers, well.
And that's also the reason why we say it will be broadcasted. Because if it is broadcasted, then the video recording system must be available. So that doesn't add additional effort for the agency. So maybe just a small requirement that may be fulfilled by our agency, but that will be quite precious like for us to improve ourselves.
So in terms of the broadcasting, is it in the public domain or not?
It will be in the
Will be.
public domain, yes.
Mhm.
It's broadcasted in different countries. That's why we have the ministers of transport from different nations and different languages. That's why we brought.
So if it is broadcasting and it is in the public domain, anybody can access it, I suppose. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
that's what-
Yes.
Yes.
And how would this impact your rate? The fact that it's broadcasting. I mean, I would assume you always try to do your best anyway. And provide the best quality.
We can ask,
yeah.
we can ask for a higher rate, because we will have we are like exposed to everyone in this case, so we have to guarantee them that our job, of course, is the best that we can do, but also from the other side we can ask for a higher rate because of broadcast, so because it's going to be online and it's going to be viewed by everyone.
Any other ideas? So you'll just say, I want more money because I have to do better, because then everybody's watching it.
Obviously, we don't provide our service based on how much salary we got. So
Of course, it's always our best.
Yeah, like we always need to like be our best. But actually, interpreters work under quite like high pressure. So especially when it comes to broadcasting, the pressure just like increases like several levels suddenly because everyone can access it. So maybe we can ask the agency and talk about the pressures that we're under and the additional preparation that we made. So it's kind of like a negotiation process, but certainly that doesn't mean we will not provide a low quality service if they don't give us a fair rate.
Yeah. And it's also because it's broadcasted, so we address more audience. So more audience are receiving this our professional service. So in a sense, we would like to ask for a rate.
I think the keyword I was looking for is copyright. So that's how you would like to negotiate rather than I have to do better because everybody's listening to me. Yeah, so that's how you justify a higher rate.
And also, if you make a mistake, everybody knows about it. For
It's
your reputation,
which is
Yeah,
priceless.
Yeah,
That's okay.
It's good when you have a good performance, but that's on the other side.
yeah.
It's risky.
I do have one question. You mentioned something very interesting. You said that you'd actually wrote down the phonetic transcription of the names. Is that in your glossary? Because I couldn't find it now.
But because we did it when we met, and it was quite informal. We just had a look at the names we struggled with and just made a note for us to practice. But we didn't think about adding it to our glossary.
And also we learnt them off by heart for the present, like also
Yeah.
all the key speakers try to learn off by heart. So
And also in glossary, we always adjust the source language and the target language. Obviously, the name of the speakers, that's just one word from the source language. The target language may be the same. So I think that will not be included in glossary, at least for this time and in our task. So it's better for us to remember the phonetic, just remember them by heart and then use them straight away. And also based on my own experience, I just attended a real conference and the real interpreters, the simultaneous interpreters, they just repeat the name very quickly so they don't check it phonetically. It saves a lot of time for them and their performance was very professional.
Okay, I've got one question. When you said that you're going to try to meet the interpreters that you're going to interpret with, so then later on you said, well, some interpreters we could meet, but the Spanish interpreter we couldn't. How do you meet these people?
Let's request contact information from the agency. We contact them just straight away to set up appointment of time, and then
To ask them if they want to collaborate first, maybe they don't have to accept.
but also we can use Google Hangouts as well. Is a good way to. It's much more convenient to meet and to exchange ideas online.
Okay. Interpreters travel quite a lot.
Skype.
I don't have any other questions.
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.